What's going on, everybody? Marcus back again here with a special vlog. Today I wanted to talk about something that happened to me the last 3 days. I was called and I served on a jury. And as a matter of fact, I was actually the foreperson in a very short 3-day trial. So this first part, it's going to be split up into two videos. The first video that you're watching now is going to be talking about the jury selection of day 1 and day 2 of the trial. So I'll go ahead and start with the jury selection. There were COVID procedures in place. So we had to stand 6 feet apart. We actually had to sit all around the courtroom. And we had to take up 2 other courtrooms because there was just too many of us. So we had a Zoom conference on the actual courtroom. I actually was in a different courtroom waiting to be called in. And I was juror number 26 out of 40 in that group. So what ended up happening was, starting with jury selection, the judge started asking basic questions about what experiences we had with law enforcement, if we had negative experiences with law enforcement, and do we believe law enforcement to always be truthful. The case was actually a DUI case. We didn't know much about it, but that it was a DUI case. So quite a few people kind of passed until we got to one lady who basically said that her son was a SAC PD officer and that she always supports police no matter what and doesn't think police ever lie. And at that point, the judge said, "Ma'am, this isn't the trial for you. We're looking for people who are impartial. You're excused." So she was gone pretty quick. But secondly, after the judge asked the majority of the jurors questions, we had gone down to about maybe 20 jurors. So the judge actually knocked off a lot of jurors. And a lot of them had to do with alcoholism. A lot of people had really problems with alcohol in their families, and they were very, very insensitive towards DUI drivers. But I actually made the cut into the next courtroom. So I became very close. I probably would have been an alternate. And they started asking me questions about who I was, and I told them my experience as a prison guard, and I still work for a law enforcement agency, Department of Corrections, blah, blah, blah. And what ended up happening was they were about to start peremptory challenges and say, "Wait a minute, we've got 12 in the box that are clear. Let's go ahead and solidify this jury." And all of a sudden, one guy steps up and says, wait a minute, I really don't want to serve on this jury. By the way, my brother had a DUI that he didn't mention before, ended up getting booted. So at the very last minute, I get picked as a juror, and then the 2 people after me got picked up as alternates. So that took all day, by the way. I'm literally taking like 2 or 3 minutes to say what happened in an 8-hour day. So because that's the boring part, right? So the next day we get to trial, and the prosecution and defense give their opening statements, and they're very brief because it's going to be a very brief trial. The judge had warned us this is probably going to be a day or 2 of trial. And the first witness that was called was the 911 caller. So apparently this witness testified that he was pulling into a Del Taco and a black SUV had almost hit him, cutting him off into the drive-thru. And the driver started yelling obscenities and was hammering the gas pedal, trying to hurry people up to get through the Del Taco drive-thru. So he called 911, and we listened to the 911 tape. He was very calm, basically described everything. So the 911 caller in my book was pretty credible. So the next witness is the officer that pulled the suspect over. The CHP officer, the suspect ended up driving across the street to another bar of all places. And that's where the officer pulled him over, and the officer could smell alcohol on his breath and he did the horizontal gaze test and he failed it. But then the suspect decided that he wasn't going to answer any more questions. He wasn't going to take the breathalyzer, and he was placed under arrest. And The next witness was the expert witness. It was the criminologist who conducted the blood test, because he was given a blood test, and the criminologist was on the stand for a long time. I want to say she was on the stand for about 2 hours, split after lunch. So she went through a lot of technical things about, how drunk people get, how many drinks it takes, what happens when you're 0.08. In California, 0.08 is the legal limit. And she talked about how the suspect popped at 0.13, which is almost double the legal limit in California. So the defense attorney goes to cross-examine her, the criminalist. And the only thing that may have sounded like the defense attorney might have had a slight point was the criminalist had described that sometimes if you were to drink alcohol, let's say at the top of the hour, your blood alcohol level may rise throughout the night because the alcohol hasn't gone into your system yet, hasn't gone into your blood yet. So he had made the point that, hey, maybe his alcohol wasn't 0.08 at the time he was driving, but it was 0.13 at the time it was popped, which was about 40 minutes after. However, she also made the point that alcohol dissipates at 0.02% per hour. So it could have gone down or it could have gone up, but that was it. And it was so minute, in my opinion. The last witness was the phlebotomist, who basically was there to testify that she used a non-alcoholic swab. That was literally what she was there to testify for, is that she did not use an alcoholic swab on when she, did the blood test on the suspect. So then we get to closing arguments. They're very brief. The prosecution's closing argument was basically, he popped at 0.13. The 911 caller saw him driving erratically, almost hit him. The cop smelled alcohol. The witness didn't want to take a breathalyzer. The criminalist confirmed a 0.13 blood test. That's my case. The defense attorney basically said, everybody's lying. That's basically it. Everybody's lying. He wasn't a 0.08 when he was driving. It wasn't a good argument. So we actually ended the day at about 3:30 maybe, and the day ends at 4:30. So we were getting ready to deliberate. We got all the jury instructions, which took forever. And then they brought us in for deliberations. But yeah, that's it for the first blog, the day one blog. That was actually days 1 and 2, the jury selection and the trial. So stick around for part 2, which is the jury deliberations. But the only thing I do want to say, as a juror in a trial, when it came to witness testimony, what really came off as credible at the time, like in the moment, was the basic sense of confidence that the witness had in what they were saying. A lot of people like to do a lot of things, but the CHP officer, he looked pretty like a really mean guy. He was a real short white guy, real mean guy, but he was very confident. He had been a CHP officer for a long, like 7 years. So he says he's probably popped about 2,000 people for DUI. So he's very experienced. So this was like going through the motions for him. This was not his first time in courtroom. He was very impressive. The 911 caller sounded very credible. He didn't quite understand the questions all the time, because he didn't seem like he was an immigrant from India, so he didn't quite understand the questions a lot. He would say things, but he didn't really mean what he was saying half the time, but he came off as credible in terms of what he saw. So that's pretty much it for day 1. Stick around for part 2.